In this series, we've been talking about how we all want to win, not just in sports or at work, but in our relationships and in our words. Basically, we all want to win at life. And for nearly all of us, this thought exists somewhere in our minds. More equals winning. Why is that? Why do we always crave more? Because more is an appetite, and appetites can never be fully satisfied. What happens every morning, afternoon, and evening? You get hungry, right? It doesn't matter how much you eat at one meal. Once a few hours go by, you get hungry again. Every time you feed an appetite, you may be satisfied for a bit, but eventually it comes back, often even stronger than before. Every time we want more, and every time we get more, it leads to us wanting more. Our appetite for more grows. Maybe you hear that and think, so what? Who cares? It can't be that wrong to want more, can it? No, there's nothing wrong with wanting more. But wanting does have a major side effect. It's called dissatisfaction. In fact, it becomes part of our cycle. We want more, we get more, we become dissatisfied with it, so we want more, get more, and become dissatisfied again. That's because an appetite can't deliver on its promise to make us satisfied or happy. It's like chasing something we can never catch. How many of you can remember what thing you wanted this time last year? Or what you bought with your tax refund? What about what you wanted 2 years ago, or 3? My guess is that very few of us can. But I bet we all spent some time online or in stores studying, researching, and narrowing our wish list down to something very specific. And now, we can't even remember what it was. Because whatever it was, it didn't satisfy us, at least not for long. Here's what I want you to know. If you've ever felt this way, or if you basically feel this way all the time, you're not bad, you're normal. If you've ever noticed that deep down you're a little dissatisfied, it doesn't make you a terrible person. It makes you a human. And this isn't a message about how you should just stop feeling that way, or just stop buying things, or just stop wanting more and better stuff. But I do think what we're talking about today has the potential to make us all happier and more satisfied people. People who are living a better story. Let's go back to advice from a guy named Solomon, the guy we've been talking about for the past few weeks. If there's ever been a guy to take money advice from, he might be the one. In fact, he's listed among the top 10 richest men who ever lived. He accumulated more stuff and had more upgrades than any of us can even imagine. It's fair to say that Solomon understood, better than anybody, how wanting more and getting more affects your life. Here's an interesting angle he took on this topic. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Solomon tells us that there's a way for us to prosper when it comes to our desire for more. Now, it's important to understand that the word prosper doesn't mean rich. It means to be full, or in another translation of the word, it means to be fat. A generous man will be made fat. We've been talking about the appetite for more being something we can never satisfy. Like when you have an appetite for food, you always get hungry. But Solomon is saying that there is a way for us to be fat and full. There's a way for us to be satisfied, but it's the opposite of what we think. It happens not by getting more, but by giving more. Solomon tells us that people who are generous prosper. Maybe not financially, maybe not in their status or wealth, but they do prosper. They live a better story. They beat the appetite instead of letting it beat them. A generous person is someone who looks at what they have, not as a means to make them happy, but as a means to make others happy. And while that sounds good, generosity tends to make us nervous, doesn't it? Maybe you even felt a little knot in your stomach when you heard this was the topic today. That's because there's an obvious problem. If we give things away, we have less for ourselves. But Solomon says the exact opposite is true. The more you give, the more you have. Giving fills us with more happiness, more influence, more joy, and more purpose. Basically, more of what we really want, more of what really gives us a better life. And I don't believe I'm overselling this. Think about it. How many of you hate generous people? How many of you can't stand your neighbor who is constantly offering to share his lawnmower or her backyard pool? How many of you lost respect for a parent or a grandparent who was quick to be generous with those who were struggling? How many of you stop shopping at businesses that give generously to the community? None of us, right? We love being around generous people. We want to support generous organizations. We're inherently attracted to generosity. And when you and I act out of generosity, not only are we more liked by those around us, but we like ourselves better. We respect ourselves more. We have a sense of what we're doing. What we're working for means something to the world around us. Generous people see what they have as a means to love others. And here's the best part. Being generous is an appetite as well, which means it can grow. The more generous you are, then the more generous you become. In other words, if you want to win in life, grow your appetite for giving. Solomon finishes the verse this way: "He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed." The side effect for generosity is refreshment. That means that being generous makes you feel full and satisfied because it also allows you to refresh others. When we take our desire for more and point it toward others, we in turn get refreshed. Refreshed isn't a word we use all the time, but I bet you know the feeling. Maybe it's the feeling you get after a weekend away. Maybe it's walking out of the gym after a great workout. It's a relief, it's life-giving, and it's satisfying. Maybe you felt this way after a tough stretch at work. You've felt a lot of stress and anxiety. You've been exhausted. And then you leave on a weekend vacation for the beach. You take a deep breath because you realize that you get relief. These moments are priceless, refreshing. Solomon says that's the type of life you get when you refresh others with generosity. And when you experience that, you want more of it. Just like how our appetite for more stuff for ourselves grows as we feed it, so does our appetite for generosity. Generosity makes you crave more generosity. We think we'll be happier if we have more, but that's just our appetite for more talking. It's not reality. Solomon tells us the truth. We will be happier, satisfied, and refreshed if we learn to give more away. You might be thinking, I don't have a lot to be generous with. I'm not rich. Our family isn't rich. We've got a new baby, a mortgage, college tuition to cover. How can I be generous? Great question. First of all, you are rich. According to the Global Rich List, if your family makes $44,000 a year, you're in the top 0.5% of earners in the entire world. Now, I know that doesn't excite a lot of us because even though it's true, we don't feel rich. But even though you don't feel rich and you may not have a lot compared to others around you, when you compare it to the rest of the world, you have more than you could ever imagine. One way you can feel rich is to start acting like it. I'm not talking about buying something you can't afford. I'm talking about giving stuff away. In fact, being generous is not just about money. It's about your time, energy, emotions, and belief in others. Generosity is about a spirit of giving in every way, and all of us can learn to do that. Here are a couple of ways. First, give from your excess. Where do you have extra? Where can you look around and see needs? What if you were generous with your excess time and you decided to volunteer once a month or once a week? What if you were generous with your excess stuff? How many pairs of jeans do you have? Think you could part with a pair? Some shoes? Some shirts? Some of your kids' toys? What if you were generous with your attention to your coworkers or family? The point is, we all have excess. What if we stopped holding on to it and started being more generous? You can also give from your best. Giving away what you already have a lot of is totally doable, but you can also take it one step further. You can give off the top. You don't have to wait to see what you have in excess. You can give away some of your best. Yes, it's more costly and challenging, but you may find yourself becoming a more satisfied and refreshed person in the process. What if you took the money from your work or side projects and decided the first thing you would do with your money was to be generous? What if your first thought was not, what can I get with this? But instead you thought, what could I give with this? How can I refresh someone else's life with this? What if you sat down at the beginning of the week, looked at your calendar, and decided to give some time away to somebody else? How can I refresh somebody's life this week with my time? You could give money to a local charity, or you could simply buy lunch for a friend. You could help an organization collect winter jackets for the homeless, or you could buy one for them yourself. You could babysit the grandkids so your adult children can have a date. Do this enough, and you'll find yourself satisfied with less and hungry to give more. Very few people ever learn to do this well. We are born with a natural tendency to desire more. It's part of our nature as humans, and most people will spend their entire lives in a cycle of being dissatisfied and wanting more. But what if you were the exception? Imagine what kind of life you could live and lead if you learned to be generous. What kind of relationships would you have? What kind of influence would you have? What level of happiness could you achieve if you gave away so much that your hunger for more grew weaker and your hunger for generosity grew stronger? I want you to imagine how you could win in your relationships and life with this sort of generosity. When you grow your appetite for generosity by being more generous, you'll actually find a more refreshing life. It sounds crazy, but when it comes to our appetite for more, generosity is how we go for the win.